To Connect and Collaborate, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm so excited that we are going to talk Amendment 73 today. I have in studio with me Dave Davia. He is the CEO of the Colorado Association of Mechanical and Plumbing Contractors, and Luke Ragland. He is the president of Ready Colorado, and these guys are both the co-chairs on No on 73 campaign. So first of all, welcome, and
thank you.
How's it going this afternoon?
It's a wonderful day in Colorado.
Yes,
Nice
right?
to see that sun make an appearance after a couple of days of Seattle-like weather.
Yes, I was excited too. I know I actually got to turn off my lights in my office and have just the sunshine in. It was really nice today. So I'm glad to see that. But it's also that time of year, right? We're looking at voting. And Amendment 73 is made it onto the ballot this year. So let's talk about what Amendment 73 is first.
Great. So we'll start with the basics. Amendment 73 is a $1.6 billion tax increase. If it passed, that would be the largest tax increase in Colorado's history. It raises that revenue in a variety of ways. The first and most significant is an increase in individual and joint filing tax rates. So starting at any individual, family, or small business that makes more than $150,000 a year, they're going to see increased taxes. The top rate, it's a graduated income tax. We leave our flat tax that we've had for many decades in Colorado and move to a graduated income tax. The top rate in that graduated income tax would be an 8.25%. That's a 78% increase over the current amount. So a really gigantic increase. And it's important to remember, it's often sold as an individual that makes that much sees a tax increase. And it's important to remember those are joint filers too. So sort of two working adults would see a big increase. There is a corporate tax increase that's 30% across the board. Colorado would have a higher corporate tax if it passed than Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. So right now we actually have a lower corporate tax rate than those three states. Those are big time competitors for businesses. We would have a higher corporate tax rate than those folks. Those individual tax rates, thinking about them in terms of nationally, would be the 8th highest in the country. Colorado would have a top tax rate on par with states like New York and Vermont. It'd be a pretty radical change from where we're at. And then finally, there's a property tax increase. Now, this is actually a really tricky component of the ballot initiative. It actually lists it as a property tax decrease for residential property, but that's not quite accurate. The current assessed value rate in Colorado is 7.2%. It's scheduled next year to go to 6.1%. This freezes at 7.0. So it's sort of a sneaky way to describe a property tax increase as a property tax decrease. Bottom line, if you own a home in Colorado, you'll pay more property taxes if this passes.
Really? I don't think I realized that. I was doing some research myself earlier today, and for me as an individual, and not to put my salary on air, but I definitely don't make $150K a year, right? And I don't joint file with anyone, so I didn't feel like I would be impacted by this, but I am looking to buy a home.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I think that's one way. Another thing to think about is these tax rates aren't adjusted for inflation, so they're set in stone, meaning that as inflation naturally occurs, more and more Coloradans, thousands every year, are going to have automatic tax increases. Even the federal government figured this out in the 1980s and indexed the progressive tax rates for inflation. These are not adjusted for inflation, so more and more Coloradans are going to see increases every single year.
Well, and that's an important point that Luke makes, because what this does is it's an amendment to the state's constitution. So it forever locks into the constitution the amounts that Luke has described for you, and it will mean that the only way to change those is to go back to the voters and ask that those be adjusted. Speaking of the voters, I hope you have a weight belt to pick up the Blue Book this year and about $7 in postage. I think there's 13 statewide ballot initiatives, let alone the local, municipal, and all the state races that are going on. So it's going to be a lengthy ballot to get through. One of the things that we have as a campaign an objection to is really the title and the language that you see. So if you just, as a person relying on the language that the ballot has, pick that up and read it, and it says, shall taxes be increased by $1.6 billion? Shall the individual income earners making $150,000 or more see an increase from the 4.63% that is today's tax rate, adjusted by 0.37%, And really, if you do the math, 463 goes to 5%. That's actually an 8% increase. At $200,000, that jumps again. At $300,000, it jumps again. And then the way the language reads on the top bracket is it says, shall taxes be increased by 3.62% for folks earning $500,000 and more. It takes the rate, though, from 463 to 8.25%. So what that means is the language is deceptive. Same thing on the property tax piece. On the corporate tax rate, it says shall it be raised by 1.37% from 463 to 6%. In the school I went to, that's a 30% tax increase. And so I think it's a little misleading to the voters. And I think that, the Blue Book has made attempts to fix that, but it is deceiving, we feel, the voter in a way, and not fully descriptive. And we've challenged that at different intervals, and unfortunately, both of those challenges have not weighed out in our favor.
Wow. So I'm having, I guess, a little bit of trouble. So one of the things that this is going to do is take the revenue of that $1.6 billion in taxes, and they want to put it towards the Quality Public Education Fund, which sounds great, right?
Yep.
Why not put it back into our education? There are a lot of struggling schools and teachers out there, right? And so I think this sounds amazing, but let's talk about that. Yep. Is that exactly, because it doesn't have an exact place. I can't see that. It's not tangible.
Yeah, no, it's I think your sort of lack of clarity there is well placed, because it is tricky. There is no structural changes. There are no structural changes made with this money. It's simply dumping $1.6 billion into the current education system and hoping that it results in better outcomes. So it's basically just putting more money toward the same thing and hoping that ends up in better outcomes. The biggest thing that I would say, you're hearing a lot about teacher pay. Right? I love teachers. I know Dave loves teachers. I am sure you love teachers.
Absolutely.
We all owe basically everything that we have, in a beautiful state like Colorado to some of our teachers in the past. But I really don't believe this money is going to result in higher teacher salaries. And let me tell you why. The data is actually strongly on our side. From 1992 to 2014, Colorado increased per pupil adjusted for inflation spending by 15%. So a real increase. During that same time period, teacher salaries are actually down 11% when adjusted for inflation. So if you can imagine those two trend lines, they're moving in opposite directions. As we've added more money, teacher salaries have actually gone down. And we haven't done anything to address why that's happening. And simply adding more money to those same trend lines and expecting them to suddenly shift, I think is a really bad assumption. I'm a person who likes to base information on research and data. The research is crystal clear on this one, that simply adding more money to the current system in Colorado is not going to result in higher teacher salaries.
It typically ends up in the hands of the administration more often than not, right?
Well, and what Luke keyed on was there are some components in the Blue Book that analyze, and at least the language that we've said that says, we're going to take and adjust funding for full-time kindergarten. We're going to adjust for special education. We're going to adjust. There are some things in this that do go to specific resources, but far and away, most of the money will be in the hands of the school districts to make the decisions on how it gets spent. Let's talk about the $1.6 billion. The money's going to come in and get collected. Today, the state's budget is kind of like a barrel, and the watermark fills up, and there's a sieve on the top, and once we reach a watermark, then money spills out in refunds. What this initiative, Amendment 73, will do is take all of the K-12 education spending, current and this new spending, pulls it out of the state's budget, so your watermark and the voters have passed Tabor and all the mechanics that go with that into the state's constitution. We're not going to hit that cap. Refunds are not going to happen, and forever K-12 spending will be in its own separated bucket, and more money into a system without changes to how the school finance adjustments and the amount is spent and sent out to the school districts. Some school districts in Colorado today collect more money than they get back. So money comes in, it gets sent to the state, the legislature divvies it up and sends it back to the school districts. And so there are some school districts that are net importers of money and some that are net exporters of money. Nothing in 73 fixes the formula for how the money actually gets divided up. So if I'm a town in Greeley or I'm a town in southern Colorado, am I going to send more money than I actually get in return? And that is one of the other, I think, fallacies here. The best money spent, I was on 2 foundational boards for school districts, a 5th-generation Denver native, a city councilor. I'm very vested in our communities. And, if we could put the teacher that's doing a really great job, that bundle of money in their hands, that's the best use of that money, but that's not what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think just picking up on Dave's point on the school finance formula, it's incredibly broken. And this is actually something that folks on all sides of the issue agree on, is that the way that we're funding our schools in Colorado, the method we distribute the dollars is really crazy. And I'll give you a couple examples just to build on that. We have basically a reverse Robin Hood situation in Colorado, where we take from the poor and give to the rich. I grew up in a small town called Dolores, Colorado. It's in southwest Colorado, not a wealthy place. Just up the road is Telluride, about 50 miles. Those two places, about 50 miles apart, but worlds apart in terms of affluence. The way the system works, believe it or not, is it takes money from people who live in Dolores and gives it to people who live in Telluride. We can't continue to dump $1.6 billion into a formula where that's the biggest and most prominent factor. The other thing I would just pick up on is your point about administration costs. We've actually looked into this, and your sort of guess is exactly right. From 2011 to 2017, the number of students has grown by 6% in Colorado. The number of teachers has grown by 8%. That's pretty reasonable ratios to me. The number of administrators in Colorado has grown by over 34% in that same time period. So when we have had more money to invest after the recession, after 2011, that money has went toward administration. It has not gone to teachers. It hasn't gone to classrooms. And again, Amendment 73 doesn't fix any of the structural problems in the education system. So I don't know why we would possibly think that more money is actually going to solve the problems that aren't just total dollar amount based.
Wow, yeah, I did 34% is shocking.
Yeah, that's actually a conservative number, to be really honest with you. That's just central district office administrators. That's not principals. That's not assistant principals. That's just central office administrators.
Well, there's 120,000 people in K-12 education in Colorado. Only 54,000 of them are teachers.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So maybe we should work on a structure bill, right? For how this is working. The other thing about this, I think that was interesting to me on Amendment 73 was the way the property taxes. Can we dive into that a little bit deeper, if you don't mind? Again, it's that evasive language that you have a hard time wrapping your head around it. So I appreciate you guys taking your time to go over it with me.
So the way that property taxes are collected is an assessor assesses the value of the home, residential, and they also assess the commercial. The commercial rate is going to go from 29% to 24%, and at least as it contemplates it in 73, and 7.2 to 7% on the residential rate. But as Luke pointed out, because of the way Gallagher is another locked in the state's constitution idea, way Gallagher works is next year that rate was supposed to go to 6.11%. So today, money comes in and, for argument's sake, half goes to K-12 from property tax mill collections, and half goes to city, municipal, special districts, all the other services that are relied on in the community. By taking and freezing at 7% the residential property rate, then what that means is the assessors are going to have 2 buckets now. The money will come in, and at 7% fixed forever, 7% of the revenue will go to K-12 education. Then they're going to have to establish a non-K-12 education bucket. That will be your police, fire, libraries, parks, special districts, open space, and all of those monies what's left over will flow into there. Well, as I told you before, it was about a half and half equation. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen now is the city services, the municipal services are all going to be the place where the cuts take place, because K-12 is inflexible and locked into, from a formula perspective, the state's constitution. So the other city services or municipal services that people rely on, police and fire, parks and rec, library, all of those things are going to get cut, because as the way Tabor works, it ratchets down based on property values. You can't collect, according to Gallagher, more than 45% of the revenue from the residential stream and more than 55% from the commercial stream. So that's going to be a big impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think net, what does that mean for the average Colorado taxpayer? It means two important things. It means, one, if you own a home, you're going to pay higher property taxes. And two, your local services, police, fire, sanitation, open space, rec centers, I mean, all the sort of local stuff, cities, counties, they're going to take a hit. Because it doesn't change the Gallagher formula, as Dave described, but it does freeze the school portion. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Essentially, yeah. Gosh, thank you. I'm learning a lot today. I appreciate it. The other side of things, you mentioned earlier that we would be in a tax bracket, not bracket, but closer to rates closer to Vermont and New York. With the way that we're growing, I don't feel like it's necessarily unreasonable to grow alongside that, right? Have higher tax. What counterpoint do you have for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason you're seeing that massive growth in Colorado and why the economy is doing well, you know, a lot of people point out we have the best or one of the best economies in the country. It's because of our current tax structure. It's very friendly to growth, investment, small business in particular. You know, this initiative actually punishes small businesses more than it does large businesses. And let me describe why. The C corporation rate is raised from 4.63 to 6. But the small business rate, all other businesses, which the vast majority of small businesses file under an LLC or an S Corp or one of those forms, they're actually going to be subject to the new individual graduated income taxes, which have a top rate that increases by 78%. So small businesses actually stand to receive a much higher tax increase than large businesses. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, knowing Colorado. I'll let Dave talk about his membership, but small business is the sort of engine that is driving Colorado. When you look at where people are leaving, the states that have those super high top tax brackets, people are fleeing those states. They're losing residents every year. Colorado is gaining those peoples. Colorado's economy is benefiting from its comparative advantage with other states in terms of tax rates. And this basically just takes us out of that.
Yeah, the corporate rate here is 4.63. Utah's is 5%. And as you look across the Rocky Mountain region, we've got one of the lowest. To Luke's point, Tom Clark, a former EDC, Metro Denver EDC CEO, said our best two economic developers are Governor Jerry Brown from California and the governor of Illinois, because those rates have pushed 8-10%. And so, I'll speak to a specific. We own a small business, my wife and I. She owns and operates it. Actually, let me just be clear, she owns everything. I get the pleasure of just tagging along on the journey. But we own a small business, and what Luke has said is very true. Because we're not a C Corp, the money that we collect, whether we stick in our pocket or not, at the end of the day, we get taxed on. And we provide all of our employees 401ks with 6% match. We provide all of our employees health care. We provide our employees other benefits. And so, we're right out of the gate, we're going to be in the next highest tax bracket because of the way our business performs. We did a little analysis for a company who generates revenue and has a $2 million income. If they were filing as a C corporation and Amendment 73 passes, they will see a $27,000 additional tax bill. If that same company has a tax structure as an LLC or an S Corp and files, their net tax bill with Amendment 73 passing will be over $60,000. So almost 2.5 times more. More than 2 times what a C corporation. In the C corporations, you're looking at big multinational corporations, big headquartered. If you go downtown, the names are on the buildings. But our little business is not one of those. We still have a name on the building and have a shingle, but we're going to get kind of doubly hit, if you will. And then let's factor into the equation. with the tax reform that got passed at the federal level, you used to be able to declare and write off your state income tax on your federal tax and to adjust your tax basis. Well, that was called the SALT deduction, and they did away with that. So anybody who has state income tax that they pay, you're only able to take the first $10,000 as a deduction and no more. So companies are already paying more taxes as a result of the federal tax reform. Couple that with what's about to or what's on the ballot is Amendment 73, and we think small businesses are going to get doubly whacked. We go from one of the lowest in the Rocky Mountain region to the highest overnight if this passes.
Wow.
Yeah, and you think about what types of small businesses are particularly vulnerable to this thing. There's a lot of small businesses that their income is cyclical. They don't have steady income year over year. Farmers are the classic example, right? Construction. Yeah, that's a great example. Those folks can't count on making a steady income every year, and a graduated income tax system like this applied to small businesses really hurts those farmers, construction folks who have a more sort of variable income from year to year, because they have to rely on those years where they have a spike in income to sort of make it through the lean years. But when you have that spike of income and they're going to be in those very highest 78% increased tax brackets, they might not be able to make it through those years. And I think the long-term impacts, as you start thinking like, well, what does that mean for Colorado in the long term? It means that we're less competitive. It means a lot of those businesses, these aren't mega corporations with lots of extra money to go around. They have thin margins. And if those margins get shrunk by this tax increase, they're going to go out of business. There will be a cost to this. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The proponents of this are sort of selling it on like, this is a tax on those fat cats in Washington and New York and the CEOs and the wealthy. It's not. It's going to have impacts on every sort of regular person across the state for all the reasons we have mentioned here.
Yeah, and that's the small businesses I think are key to Colorado, right? That's one of my favorite things about our economy here is how easy it is to have a startup, right? We had Denver Startup Week. That's we celebrate the startups and the small businesses here in Colorado, and so that's disheartening to see that would sort of destroy some of those businesses.
And a lot of the rhetoric that's being sold around this, I mean, Dave and I are guys who like working across the aisle, bipartisan coalitions, nonpartisan coalitions, and a lot of the rhetoric that's being sold is very divisive. It's classrooms, not corporations, and these sorts of things. But that's not the Colorado way of doing things. We've always succeeded by doing things together, by bringing business and education together, by bringing different parts of the state, rural and urban parts of the state together. And, Amendment 73 just disregards all of that Colorado history. Dave and I always like to brag, I'm a fourth generation Colorado, and Dave always throws out the fifth generation thing to try to rub in my face. But
I've been here 8 years.
You're on your way.
Right? I will never be a native.
A couple of sort of things I think we'd wrap up with, and I encourage Dave to share any final thoughts. The number one thing is the people who are a part of the No on 73 campaign, we care deeply about schools. We care. I mean, we have kids. I don't want to leave Colorado. I hope that my daughter and I have great grandkids here in Colorado. This isn't about one versus the other, classrooms versus corporation, business versus schools, or rich versus poor. This is about setting up a system that's sustainable, where everybody can succeed. And Amendment 73 would do a real serious damage to that sort of long-term vision.
And I think that the other thing that at least I go back to is every time that we want to make a decision about empowering teachers and about trying to get money into classrooms. Look, you couldn't pay me enough money to sit. I have an 8-year-old with 20 to 38-year-olds in a classroom. There's not an amount of money that would fix my ability to do that. We've pulled programs out of schools like shop class and medals. If that was part of this mix, or teacher pay was part of this mix, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here saying vote no on 73. Right. And that is the kind of the genesis of why I'm here.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a pleasure having you on. I learned a lot today about Amendment 73. Is there somewhere I can find more?
Go ahead, Dave.
Our website, noon73.com, is a great resource.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.